So let's take a look at strings. As usual, I'm going to go to my code folder and create a new file here and save it to the code folder, and I'm gonna call it strings.rb. So as you probably know, you can do puts and then hello world, and if we run this, we see that it prints. If we change this to, instead of using double quotes, we start using single quotes, nothing changes. So in Ruby, there are a few ways to do strings. I'd say there are 4 ways to do it. And you already know 2 ways, which is one is using double quotes, and the other one is using single quotes. They can be used whenever you're calling a function, or they can also be used if you're just assigning a variable. And it doesn't really matter if you're using one or another. Now, a different way of doing it is by using this notation. So you can use the %, and it's still going to work. Or if you prefer to do it like this, it is also going to work. And I would say that this last way is quite uncommon. You wouldn't see much of this being used. The most common are double quotes and single quotes. So I want to tell the difference now between single quotes and double quotes. And the difference is a really small one. So let's say I have some name here. I'm going to say that the name is Jane. Let's go with Jane. And one thing I could do in Ruby would be hello Jane. So nothing new here. So hello, and then this is putting these 2 strings together and just then forming a new string that is going to be hello Jane, and it's going to be assigned to the x variable. And then we are just calling puts with the value that is in the x variable. And the result we can see here, hello Jane. So if I would change this to this, it wouldn't change anything. I could also use this notation, and it wouldn't change anything. Now, one thing that in Ruby is also not so common. So this is not common in Ruby, not common. Another thing is this plus sign here. So we've been using the plus sign for putting 2 strings together, or even more than 2 strings. But the reality is that you're rarely going to see this plus sign to put strings together. So Ruby has a feature that also other programming languages have, which is called interpolation. So it's called string, let me write a comment, string interpolation. So this is a string interpolation. Now let me write this code. Let me actually copy this code and paste it here. And I'm going to write this same code now using this feature called string interpolation. So this is how it works. You have this string, and inside it you put this hashtag symbol, and then you open curly brackets. And between the curly brackets, you can have some Ruby code. And here I have just the variable name. And the reality is that line 6 over here and line 9 over here, they're doing the same thing. So the result is going to be the same. So if I comment this line, and if I run this code, the result is exactly the same. And I can even come over here, for instance, add a exclamation mark, and if I run it, there you go, you see the exclamation mark there. To do this same thing with the exclamation mark over here, you could see that you would have to do this. So if I now comment this code and run it, it would be the same result. Now, I think it should be easier to see that this is just more simple to do than this one. And often it is told that this one is better in terms of, so it's more simple. They say it's better in terms of performance. I never seen anyone prove that, but yeah, they say that. And it is also more readable. So it's going to produce a better code. So it's easier for somebody to look at this and read it. However, there's one thing here. So if I comment this line and run it, you're going to see that it works. And however, if I change this double quote to single quote, now what happens next is that this stops working. So it's going to print, so the value of x is going to be just what is between the simple quotes. For this thing, this little thing over here, which is the string interpolation after all, for it to work, you have to use double quotes. So double quotes, they allow for using string interpolation. And I'd say that that is actually the main difference between double quote and single quote. And as you can see here, what I did is actually that this method also allows for string interpolation. So single quotes, you allow no string interpolation, and double quotes, you do allow them. And yeah, so these are the main methods or the main ways of performing declaring strings in Ruby. And just to go a little bit more in depth about string interpolation, you can also do something like 2 plus 3, let's say, and you're gonna see that what it does is that it runs this Ruby code, and then after it converts the result to a string, and it replaces this thing with the string over here. And yeah, if you would use here instead of the double quotes this symbol here, it would also produce the same output. Now, what I also want to show to you is another method of declaring strings. So I'm gonna put back here Jane, or better name, which is gonna have the value of Jane right now. And another way of doing strings in Ruby is using this. And let's put an end here. Now, if I run this now, you're gonna see hello Jane, and then the funny thing is that the actual exclamation mark is going to be on next line. And what this is all about is that this one allows one to declare, or to easily declare, multiple line strings. So you could say like Jane and Joey. I'm going to remove these exclamation mark. But if you run this, it's going to be hello Jane, and then after Jane there is one line break, which is being printed here, and then end, and then a line break again, and then 2 spaces, and then Joey, and then there's also again a line break. So yeah, so this is the way you would do multiple line strings. And let's say we want to pad. Now there's a small variance of this method here, and let's say we want to add some padding here just to display it a little bit better inside code. And if we now run this, you're gonna see that this padding that we just added, which are these 2 spaces, they are now being displayed as well. You can see that the end is a little bit more to the right, and also Joey is a little bit more to the right. So this is a small variation of these, where instead of using a dash, you use this symbol. And then if you run it, you're going to see it's just like it was before. So what this does is that it ignores this padding. So it says, it tells Ruby to ignore this padding in front of the whole string. And yeah, so about this end over here. So this could be anything. This could be really anything. It just has to be, I never see, I don't know if you can use it lowercase actually. I never seen it, never ever. I think it has to be uppercase. That's just a small detail, but it could be anything. And what it does is that it just determines where is the beginning and where is the end of this thing. So let's say you would have for instance, a letter, I don't know, Jane and Joey. This is the end, and you want to say like this. So it's going to print it like this. And if you would use end here instead of this thing, you're going to see that it's going to be, you're going to have a problem here. So the code is not going to run because this end is actually what is ending this string. And then this end is just not part of this at all. Ruby is not considering this as part of this. So you better use something that is not contained in the string. So not in the string, could be anything. And then you can safely print that end again. So yeah, this is the basic idea. So this is the way to do multiple line strings in Ruby. This is the way to do non-interpolation strings. And double quotes is the way to do interpolated strings. I want to show also some other things, some operations about strings. So here we have this variable called name, and we are assigning it to X. And let's say that Jane and Bob. So let's say Jane and Bob. Now if we put this, it is gonna put hello Jane and Bob. Let me actually put a variable called y. So I'm gonna write that y equals x dot tr, and the first parameter here is gonna be an empty, just a space, and the second parameter is gonna be a dash. So if I run this, can you probably guess what this is gonna do? Well, I bet you cannot, because what does tr means? So as you see the result, now we have hello dash Jane dash and dash Bob. So what it did, it replaced all the spaces. So it replaced whatever was here with whatever was here. So it replaced strings, empty spaces with dashes. And it could really be anything. Like we could say that it would replace B's with, I don't know, interrogation marks. So you see that the only B that we had was here in Bob, and it didn't replace the first one because that's uppercase, which is different from lowercase. And yeah, so the thing is, you see this tr thing here, and how do you know what it actually means? So one thing that I want to say now, I want to show you, is the most important thing is you're going to memorize some of the methods. So this is a method, or you could also say it's a function that a string has. So you're gonna end up memorizing with time. This is gonna take time. There's no other way than practicing and writing Ruby code over and over again. And for sure, you're gonna memorize this. So the main methods you're gonna memorize. But how do you know in the first place that tr exists and what it does? So the way to do that is that you can come to the internet and ask, for instance, Ruby string tr, for instance, what does the tr method does? But what if you don't know about a tr method? And what are actually the options that we have for a string? So you can come here to this website. I recommend this ruby.org, which has the documentation for Ruby. And you want to look into the core API. So here we are using Ruby 2.6, I think. We can check with Ruby -v. So it's Ruby 2.6.6. It should not change from one version to another so much. So let's look at 2.7 and it's just going to be fine. It's going to be probably the same thing. And then the page looks quite confusing because Ruby has so many things, as any other programming language really. So if I press here Ctrl F and type in string, I'm gonna find this string thing here. So I'm gonna click it, and here on the left I'm gonna see this methods category, and we're gonna find here so these are all methods or functions, if you will, and they all start with hashtag, but some of them, like these ones here, they start with 2 colons. So you want to look for the ones starting with a hashtag, because these are what we call instance methods, and these ones are called class methods. So I'm gonna talk about these class methods and instance methods and what is the real difference between a method and a function, but I'm gonna talk about that in a later video because that's gonna be about object orientation. So if you wanna read it already about it, you can go, but it's not necessary for now. So we see here that, so this is a string. This is a string object. This is a string class. And these here on the left are the functions or the methods that you can use with strings. So you can see that there's quite of a big list. And our tr method is going to be somewhere here. So if we look for it, so tr, there you go. So here's the tr method. And if I click it, I'm going to see a brief documentation about it. So this is the official documentation for what this tr method does. So you can see here that this looks like a function definition. So previously we saw that a function or a method is going to be like def and then tr, and then they're saying this from string, and this is an argument of a function, and then to string, and so this function has 2 arguments. That is why there's a comma in between. So this is the first argument, this is the second argument. And you can see here that whenever I'm calling it, I'm passing these 2 parameters or arguments. Call it however you want. So in this case, we are calling tr. The from str is going to be b, and the to str is going to be the interrogation mark. And so here you can see that it returns a copy of string with the characters in the from string replaced by the corresponding characters in the to string. And here you can see some examples of how it works. And that is the basic idea. So why I'm showing this to you? Is it about the tr? No, it's not about the tr itself. This is really about how to find documentation for Ruby, for anything really, for Ruby in general. So this is just a tr method, and I could teach you all of these methods, but this would take just a long time. And I want to show you some very few basic important methods, but I really recommend you that you go here and you try using different ones. So you try, for instance, see what is bytes, for instance. What is, this one could be a little bit complicated, but for instance, this shump method, this is useful. Or the concat method, or the count method. Also the delete or delete prefix. Also, let's say equal, and you see equal interrogation mark. That is because a function or a method in Ruby, they can have special symbols like an interrogation mark in their names. Index is very useful as well. gsub is very similar to tr, although it can get a little bit more complicated. And inspect is also an interesting method. And then there's lstrip, There's also R strip, and there's just strip, which is very useful. Length. So you're gonna, there's a lot of methods here. Really, there's a lot. And I'm not gonna go over all of them, and not just, maybe just a few like tr here. But I totally recommend that you go and try using different methods. So I'm gonna go through just a few. So let's say down case. So dot down case. And let me minimize this. So for instance, if I run this now, you're gonna see that hello Jane and yeah, it's replacing hello and ba. It's now all down case. If I use upcase and run it, well, you guessed, it's gonna be all uppercase. So also here what you see is that I'm chaining methods. Why can I chain them? So chaining, I mean, I'm doing like X and then I'm calling tr, and after tr I am calling upcase. And if I would do, for instance, downcase and then replace the B by this symbol, what would happen now is that we would have both the B's of Bob replaced with an interrogation mark. Or we could even replace for a uppercase B. So why? Why is this like this? It is because this is being executed first. So this is also always, whenever you chain method like this, so you call one, then you call another, what is going to happen is that this one is going to be called first. So the code is going to do x.downcase, and the result of that is then going to be fed to the tr method. And if we had something here as well, like upcase, let's say, then it would execute this one and feed it to the tr, and then this whole thing here, which is the result of tr, is then going to be applied to upcase. So it's going to call upcase for this whole thing here. So it's always in sequence, and it's always from left to right. That's how programming works in most programming languages. Not all of them, but most of them. And that's also the case in Ruby. So other than that, I want to also show another interesting method, which is length. And what length does, you see 19 here. And what it does, it returns the length of the string. So if you count every character here, including this white space, including this exclamation mark, you're going to see 19 characters. So the length method is quite useful. And I'm not going to show more methods than this. And I really recommend that you go and you read that Ruby documentation, you try different methods, you try doing different things with strings. Otherwise, you would not learn. So if you don't practice what you are learning here, you will not learn. So this is it for this video. Catch you in the next one. Goodbye.